The US restricting the sale of chips that NVIDIA designed specifically for the Chinese market to help export curbs that block China's access to highly advanced semiconductor technology.
The ongoing battle between the United States and China has been fraught with numerous conflicts and disputes, leaving many to wonder if a resolution is even possible. However, among the many concerns at hand, one particular conflict has recently taken center stage: the microchip war. The US and China are now engaged in a fierce battle over semiconductors, the chips that literally power our daily lives, and it looks like the US might just be gaining the upper hand, all thanks to the tech powerhouse NVIDIA. But how exactly is NVIDIA turning the tide in favor of the US? In this video, we will reveal how NVIDIA is saving the US from losing the chip war to China and what challenges and opportunities lie ahead for this tech giant. But just before we go into details about this chip war, we need to first understand how it all started in the first place. It all started back in October 7th, 2022, when the Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security, also known as BIS, decided to shake things up by putting some serious restrictions on semiconductor technology exports to China. This move was aimed at cutting off China's access to high-end semiconductor chips that could be used to create weapons. The restrictions got even tighter on October 17, 2023, when the Department of Commerce finalized its proposed US export control rules. These changes have had a massive impact on the semiconductor industry, and it's becoming clearer by the day. But these restrictions were not an isolated incident, but rather followed a 2019 ban by the Trump administration on US companies supplying goods and services to Chinese telecom giant Huawei without export licenses. This effectively cut off Huawei's access to vital US semiconductors. Building on this policy, President Joe Biden tightened these restrictions in 2022. The Biden administration has taken it a step further by clamping down on outbound investment. In a bold move on August 9, 2023, President Biden signed an executive order to create a mechanism for restricting outbound investment in the semiconductor, quantum information, and AI sectors in foreign countries of concern, with China being one of them. The Department of Treasury is gearing up to impose outbound restrictions on US investments in critical Chinese AI sectors related to military, intelligence, surveillance, and cyber-enabled capabilities. It looks like there's more to come in terms of restrictions. It's safe to say that the US is playing hardball in the microchip war, and it seems to be coming out on top. With these strategic moves and restrictions in place, the US is definitely making its mark in the battle for dominance in the semiconductor industry. Only time will tell how this war will play out, but for now, it looks like the US has the upper hand. But what's all the fuss about these little semiconductors that have two major nations locked in a battle? Let's break it down for you. Semiconductors are like the building blocks of the digital world. They power everything from the internet to cutting-edge technologies like artificial intelligence, 5G, quantum computing, robotics, and autonomous vehicles. They're basically the secret sauce behind all the cool stuff we use every day. But it's not just about cool gadgets. These chips are also crucial for national security. They're the brains behind our weapons and defense systems, as well as essential components of things like GPS and space technology. In other words, they're a pretty big deal. In fact, chips are so important that China now spends more money importing them than it does on oil. Apparently, the pandemic put a spotlight on just how dependent the global economy is on these chips. When there was a shortage, car factories had to shut down and prices for electronics shot through the roof. Also, the semiconductor industry is expected to be worth $500 billion by 2030, and whoever controls the supply chains for these chips holds a pretty hefty amount of power in the global economy. So, it's a big deal, and the US is doing everything in their power to have the upper hand. But what prompted this strategic move against China? Clearly, Washington has a couple of major concerns driving their actions. Firstly, there's the worry that China's People's Liberation Army, also known as PLA, could potentially outstrip the US military in overall power. And secondly, there's the fear that China could leverage US technology to achieve this dominance. President Xi Jinping has set the ambitious goal of transforming the PLA into a world-class military by 2049, which just so happens to be the centenary of the Chinese Communist Party's rule. A key part of this lofty ambition involves developing autonomous weaponry, including hypersonic missiles and harnessing artificial intelligence for a whole host of applications, including electronic warfare. Now, it's not entirely clear just how close China is to realizing this grand vision. According to the US Department of Defense's annual report on China's military power, the PLA is actively pursuing next-generation combat capabilities, defined by the expanded use of artificial intelligence and other advanced technologies at every level of warfare. But while China may be a global frontrunner in certain AI applications like facial recognition, their domestic industry hasn't quite mastered the production of the most cutting-edge semiconductors that power these technologies. As a result, Chinese businesses and the military alike are heavily reliant on imports to get their hands on these advanced chips. And that's precisely why the US is aiming to shut off that supply. By tightening the reins on the export of advanced chips to China, the US hopes to maintain its competitive advantage in this critical arena. Let's take a closer look at the details of China's restrictions. Like we mentioned earlier, the Biden administration has thrown down the gauntlet by imposing a hefty set of export controls specifically aimed at cutting off China's access to US origin semiconductors and related products. This means that businesses and individuals in China are now finding themselves unable to get their hands on advanced chips and chip-making technology from US suppliers without jumping through some serious hoops. We're talking about needing a specific license from the US government just to make a purchase. Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, has even gone so far as to describe these restrictions as a way to safeguard foundational technologies with a small yard and high fence. And of course, it wouldn't be a proper showdown without some accusations flying back and forth. She and other senior CCP officials are crying foul and accusing the US of employing Cold War-style containment tactics. As if that wasn't enough, the US has also dropped the bombshell that it's banning its own citizens and permanent residents from supporting the development or production of chips at certain factories in China. And to really ruffle some feathers, they're using NVIDIA to make some moves that China might not be able to recover from. NVIDIA, a powerhouse in the semiconductor chip world, has long been a dominant player in the market for graphics processing units, which are essential for a range of applications including artificial intelligence, gaming, and cloud computing. The company has made significant investments in AI research and innovation, with projects like ChatGPT, a popular natural language generation system that harnesses the power of thousands of NVIDIA's GPUs. So by targeting NVIDIA, the US is taking aim at a key player in China's technological landscape. Whether this approach will ultimately lead to victory remains to be seen, but one thing's for sure: the battle for dominance in the world of microchips is heating up, and the US is showing no signs of backing down. So how did China react to these restrictions? The official newspaper of the CCP, People's Daily, has accused the US of containment and suppression, which sounds like someone's feeling a little threatened. And it's not just talk. China has gone as far as banning chips made by US company Micron from being used in critical infrastructure projects. China even filed a complaint against the US with the World Trade Organization, but it looks like that didn't put a dent in the US's momentum. And what about the US's allies? Are they jumping on the bandwagon and following the US's lead in restricting the movement of advanced technologies to China? Sadly, the US and its allies don't seem to be completely in sync when it comes to export control, leaving some pretty big holes in their plan to rein in China's microchip ambitions. For example, Japan has its own way of doing things. They don't have an entity list like the US, but they do require an export license for certain types of technology. And unlike the US, Japan doesn't explicitly call out China as a country of concern. And then there's the Netherlands, which holds a virtual monopoly on critical production equipment. But their export controls are limited to just a few products and don't specifically target China. It's like they're saying, we see what you're doing, but we're not quite ready to join just yet. Even semiconductor firms in Japan, South Korea, and Europe are doing their own thing. They have different interests and don't necessarily see eye to eye with the US on this whole strategic competition thing. And let's not forget about the European Union, which seems to be tangled up in red tape when it comes to making decisions. They're trying to get the authority to impose export controls on key technologies, including semiconductors, but with 27 member states all needing to approve, it's like herding cats. Progress is likely to be slow if it happens at all. But is the US strategy really working? The pressure from the US is definitely making an impact. Apple has reportedly put a hold on plans to purchase memory chips from China's YMTC, and Huawei's sales took a nosedive by 30% in 2021. Currently, China only contributes about 15% of the world's chip supply, mainly focusing on producing older, less advanced, lagging-edge chips. For the next 5 years, the US and its allies in the Chip 4 Alliance, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan, are expected to dominate the production of cutting-edge chips. But just when it seemed like the US was gaining the upper hand, a new twist emerged. It turns out that NVIDIA's AI semiconductors, which were banned from export to China by the US, have found their way into Chinese universities and military entities. It seems that Chinese businesses are still determined to get their hands on top-of-the-line chips and are resorting to creative methods to bypass export controls. Some are resorting to renting chips or buying them through intermediaries, while others are turning to a burgeoning black market for smuggled semiconductors, as reported by the Financial Times. But how did this happen? According to Reuters, an analysis of publicly released tender documents in China revealed that 10 Chinese suppliers had managed to smuggle NVIDIA's A100H, 100, and A800H, 800 AI semiconductors. These strategic assets were subject to export bans by the US government in August 2022 and October of the previous year. Despite these bans, prestigious Chinese institutions such as Tsinghua University and the People's Liberation Army were still able to get their hands on these coveted semiconductors. Tsinghua University, for example, acquired over 80 A100 semiconductors even after the export ban was imposed. The Harbin Institute of Technology, with close ties to the Chinese military and sanctioned by the US government, purchased 6 A100 semiconductors in May of the previous year for training deep learning models. It was also discovered that NVIDIA's banned semiconductors were purchased by the Chinese Academy of Electronic and Information Technology and the People's Liberation Army. But how did they manage to pull it off? It's a bit of a mystery how Chinese suppliers got their hands on NVIDIA semiconductors. Some speculate that they may have purchased excess stock that flooded the market after NVIDIA shipped in bulk to American corporations. Others suggest that the chips were imported through domestic companies with local operations in countries like India, Taiwan, and Singapore. According to Reuters, NVIDIA semiconductor smugglers have popped up in China in response to US export control measures. This just goes to show the high demand for NVIDIA semiconductors in China, despite efforts by domestic companies like Huawei to develop their own chips. Before the export control measures, NVIDIA had a stranglehold on 90% of the Chinese AI semiconductor market. NVIDIA, for its part, insists that it complies with export control laws and expects the same from its customers. They've made it clear that if they catch a customer illegally reselling their products, they won't hesitate to take action. However, despite some hiccups in compliance, China is definitely still feeling the heat, with restrictions on chip exports impacting their semiconductor ecosystem. The Dutch decision to block exports of ASML's most advanced lithography tools is a major blow to China's ability to produce cutting-edge chips. Without access to this technology, China's AI development is at risk of stalling. It's clear that China is struggling to replicate ASML's lithography technology, and their efforts to catch up seem to be falling short. Even China's most advanced maker of semiconductor lithography equipment, Shanghai Microelectronics Equipment, is lagging behind the industry's cutting-edge technology. Their announcement to start delivery of lithography equipment capable of manufacturing chips at the 28nm node is a far cry from the 2 to 3nm nodes that are currently in demand. Also, the impact of these restrictions is already being felt by Chinese companies. Yangtze Memory Technologies Co., YMTC for short, has reportedly been hit hard by Western restrictions on chip-making equipment, resulting in significant layoffs. Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation has also warned of production delays due to difficulties in securing key equipment as a result of Western export controls. To add insult to injury, the restrictions have led to sharp price increases for NVIDIA's GeForce RTX 4090 graphics card in China. The popular product, used by video game and graphics designers, now costs triple the original price at some Chinese third-party online stores. The battle is still ongoing, but for now it seems like the US is winning.